Hello and welcome to our webinar using dolls for autism evaluations. Our presenter today is Tyler Vassar, our Pearson assessment consultant. We also have Chuck Eberly, Kimberly Elizondo, and April Stewart with us today, and they will monitor the Q&A. The webinar is being presented in broadcast audio. Please turn up your computer speakers as there are no dial-in options. We are also presenting with closed caption. The webinar handout link, along with the 2024 guide, eligibility matrix, and upcoming webinar lists are posted in the chat box. Please download the documents during this live presentation. Please type your questions, concerns, and comments into the Zoom Q&A. We will answer questions live, time permitting. If your question is not answered during the live presentation or you wish to speak with a representative, please fill out the follow-up form in the link that will pop up after the webinar. Webinar certificates of attendance will be automatically emailed to you within 3 weeks. As noted in the registration, you must participate for the entire 45 minutes to be eligible for the certificate. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Tyler Vassar.
Thank you, Sherry. Hello and welcome, everyone. As Sherry mentioned, my name is Tyler Vassar, and I am a school psychologist and assessment consultant with Pearson. I'm so excited to have you all here today to take you through our Dolls for Autism Evaluations presentation created by my wonderful colleague, Kimberly Elizondo, and myself. So here are the topics that we will be covering today. We will start with a little administration overview as well as the autism diagnostic criteria. And then we will look at a few assessments from the different areas seen here that are included in the dolls. As some of you may have noticed, these also happen to be a few areas of a comprehensive autism evaluation. So my goal today is that you walk away with the knowledge of some assessments from the dolls that can be used to target these areas as part of an autism evaluation. So we will work our way through this, and I will do my best to save some time at the end to answer any questions that remain after we've covered everything today. So let's get going. First, I want to touch on our two digital platforms, Q Global and Q Interactive. Q Global is a web-based platform for scoring and reporting, as well as the administration of many assessments that are often self-administered and unproctored, like a questionnaire rating scale. These measures include assessments like the BASC-3, Vineland-3, and the Sensory Profile 2. A link can be utilized to send to teachers or parents asking them to complete these tests without having to personally put them in the mail or send them home with the student. In addition, this platform houses the resource library for many digital manuals and stimulus books that can be utilized to administer the test in a one-on-one setting or via telepractice. Q Global allows your district to generate scores and reports on any internet-connected device, even for assessments that are administered using paper forms. You can email a secure link to teachers, parents, or caregivers for convenient completion of assessments on their own device. You can print select rating scales when digital administration is not an option, and you can also access test manuals from school or home. Now we can look at Q Interactive, which is an intuitive portable system that uses two iPad devices connected through technology within the hardware to administer interactive assessments, such as the Bracken or the Self Preschool 3 in a one-on-one environment. This means that no internet connection is required for the administration of assessments. One of the greatest benefits that we've heard from our users is that their assessments are now more targeted than ever. The immediate feedback that Q Interactive provides once a subtest is complete helps deliver a faster and more accurate read on where the student is and how they are progressing at any given time. Q Interactive also allows examiners to adjust an individual battery in real time as the student is taking it. Pertinent to our conversation of assessments that can be used as part of an autism evaluation is an understanding of key characteristics outlined in the ASD criteria. So let's take a look at the DSM-5 text revision criteria for autism. We start with persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts as manifested by all of the following currently or by history, which is deficits in social emotional reciprocity, nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction, and in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. The next section includes restrictive repetitive behaviors, interests, or activities as manifested by at least two of the following: stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, insistent on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior, highly restricted fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus, and finally, hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory inputs or unusual sensory interest in sensory aspects of the environment. The symptoms must be fully present in the early developmental period. They must cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning, and these disturbances are not better explained by intellectual disability or global developmental delay. Now, as the assessments we're covering today are part of the Digital Assessment Library for schools, it's also important to consider the criteria seen in Part B of IDEA. For this, autism means a developmental disability affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction, generally evident before age 3, that adversely affects a child's educational performance. Autism does not apply if a child's educational performance is adversely affected primarily because the child has an emotional disturbance. And finally, a child who manifests the characteristics of autism after age 3 could be identified as having autism if the criteria in the paragraph mentioned in this section are satisfied. Now that we all have a better understanding of the criteria for diagnosing autism, let's dive into some of the assessments that can be found in the dolls. First, though, I would like to mention that just as no one assessment or measure should be used to determine the presence of a learning disability or speech impairment, the determination of the presence of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, should be made after a thorough evaluation that includes assessments that investigate the many domains seen here. These are a few areas of a comprehensive autism evaluation that can be targeted using assessments from the dolls. But before we jump into those assessments, I do want to mention the add-on to the dolls, which is Dolls Plus. With it, you get all the perks of our digital library, plus many of the assessments for which we do not have a digital administration. With our innovative program, staff will have access to everything they need to serve their students at a new level. If your district subscribes to Dolls Plus, you have unlimited use of protocols and response booklets for 20 plus non-digital tests, including access to all available digital manuals and stimulus books through the Q Global Resource Library. You'll also get free shipping and handling for covered print materials, and finally, 65% off any kit purchases for all Dolls products. If the test we are highlighting is available on Dolls Plus, not Dolls, the slide will be this golden yellow. Please be sure to check with your administrators if this is a feature you have. We'll include a link to the guides in the chat. Now, to start, we're going to review these 3 developmental assessments, the EZ3, the Dial-4, and the Bayley-4. The EZ3, or the Early Screening Inventory 3rd edition, is a screening tool designed to identify children who may need further evaluation to determine if they have developmental delays, including those associated with autism spectrum disorders. Here's a few ways that it can be utilized in an autism assessment. Early detection, so it can help identify young children at risk for developmental delays, which can prompt further more detailed autism-specific assessments. It assesses critical areas of development, including cognition, language, and fine and gross motor skills, which can be affected by autism. It also provides opportunities to observe a child's social interactions and communication styles. And then finally, screening results can lead to referrals for more in-depth autism evaluations, guiding professionals on which specific areas require further examination. The tool also includes a parent questionnaire, which looks at social development, educational history, and pertinent medical information that may impact a child's functioning in the school setting. I did want to note that the EZ3 is not an IQ screener, so these items selected from the primary sample of the domain of developmental tasks, rather than the domain of specific accomplishments. In other words, the EZ3 is intended to survey a child's ability to acquire skills rather than a child's current level of skill achievement performance. It can be administered in approximately 15 to 20 minutes using a paper and pencil format or in a digital format online. The online administration uses Pearson's Q Global system, which can be also used for scoring results from a paper pencil platform. The Dial-4 is the next one I want to mention, which provides an efficient way to screen large groups of children in the areas of motor, concepts, language, self-help, and social emotional skills. It can be used for kindergarten and pre-K screening, daycare screening, screening children that join later in the year, as well as for early identification, which can help pinpoint preschool-age children who may need comprehensive evaluations for developmental delays, including autism. Matched sample comparisons completed during the development of the Dial-4 indicated that children diagnosed with autism scored significantly lower in all areas compared to the matched sample. You can refer to page 66 of the manual for more information on that. As I mentioned, the 5 domains assessed are motor, concepts, language, self-help, and social emotional, and each performance area, or the motor, concepts, and language, require approximately 10 to 15 minutes for administration. This assessment provides scores for each of its 5 domains, offering total scores, percentile ranks, and standard scores, and it calculates a Dial-4 total score based on the sum of motor, concepts, and language scores. Users can select a percentile cutoff that aligns with their state guidelines for evaluation. And for the motor, concepts, and language areas, while they are individually administered, the Dial-4 uses a unique stations approach that allows schools to quickly administer the Dial-4 to a large group of children. You can set up an area with 3 stations, one for motor, one for concepts, and one for language, and a professional or paraprofessional administers that part of the test at each station, allowing children to be tested at the same time. This means that schools can test 3 children at about 30 or 45 minutes, or an entire group for a little bit of a longer amount of time. Parents or guardians fill out the questionnaire while their child's being tested. You can hand score or utilize Q Global for digital scoring and reporting for this assessment. Next, we're going to talk about the Bayley-4, which is one of the most comprehensive assessment tools for determining developmental delays in children. It's particularly useful in evaluating developmental domains such as cognitive, language, motor, social, emotional, and adaptive behaviors. This makes it a valuable component in the assessment of children suspected of having autism spectrum disorder. A 2022 study published by Psychology in Schools found that the Bayley-4 subtests are sensitive to the weak areas of functioning in children with ASD. Bayley-4 performance of very young children with autism and developmental delay as well. The Bayley-4 also offers a checklist of ASD-related behaviors. Assessment of the cognitive, language, and motor domains is accomplished by administering structured items to the child and engaging the caregiver to support responses where appropriate. The social, emotional, and adaptive behavior scales are administered via caregiver questionnaire, which allows them to share their own observations of the child's abilities. The administration takes approximately 15 to 25 minutes, and hand scoring for the Bayley-4 using the manual and record form is an option, but we also offer digital scoring through Q Global. Next, we will look at these 4 behavior assessments, the BASC-3, Vineland-3, SSIS-SEL, and the Brown EFA scales. The BASC-3 is a multi-method, multidimensional system used to evaluate the behavior and self-perceptions of children and young adults ages 2 through 25. Together, the BASC-3 components offer a comprehensive system for identifying, evaluating, monitoring, and remediating behavioral and emotional problems in children and adolescents. Each component can be used individually or in whatever combination is best suited to the situation. The primary use or purpose of the BASC-3 was designed for use in school and clinical settings for assessing behavioral and emotional problems in children and adolescents. And used individually, the BASC-3 components can provide a view of a behavior in a particular setting and or form a particular view or context, but used together, they can provide a comprehensive picture of behavioral and emotional functioning that informs clinical diagnosis. The BASC-3 has scales and indices that are related to ASD, which include atypicality, which is the tendency to behave in ways that are considered odd or commonly associated with psychosis, withdrawal, the tendency to evade others to avoid social contact, developmental social disorders, that are the tendency to display behaviors characterized by deficits in social skills, communication, interest in activities. Such behaviors may include self-stimulation, withdrawal, and inappropriate socialization. And it also has an autism probability index, which is available at the child and adolescent levels of the teacher response scale and the parent response scale, which provides an indication of the similarity between the obtained behavioral ratings and the ratings of children identified as having autism spectrum disorder. The results of a 2020 study published in the Journal of Pediatric Neuropsychology indicated that the BASC-3 parent and teacher rating scales, primarily the atypicality, withdrawal, developmental social disorders, and autism probability index scores, were both sensitive and accurate to autism spectrum disorder and differentiated this disorder with strong accuracy from ADHD and did so as well and in some instances better than longer assessments. The Vineland-3 has become the preferred instrument utilized by psychologists, clinicians, and social workers for supporting the diagnosis of intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism spectrum disorders. Its results have proven useful for diagnosis, qualification for special programs, progress reporting, and intervention planning. The Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scales, 3rd edition or Vineland-3, is an individually administered measure of adaptive behavior that's widely used to assess individuals with intellectual, developmental, and other disabilities. And the 3 administration formats help describe each client's profile from a different and important point of view. There's the interview form, which is for ages 0 up to 90 plus, which uses the time-honored Vineland semi-structured interview technique to elicit information about the examinee's adaptive functioning from a parent or caregiver. The parent or caregiver form, also with that same age range, asks about home and family life behavior using a questionnaire format completed by a parent or caregiver. And then finally, the teacher form for ages 3 through 21 collects a teacher's experiences with adaptive behavior in school, preschool, or in a structured daycare setting. Depending on the purpose of the evaluation, you may either choose a longer version, the comprehensive, or the new, briefer one, the domain level. So what does the Vineland-3 measure? It assesses multiple adaptive domains as, oops, I went too far on that one. Let's get back here. So what does the Vineland-3 measure? It measures multiple adaptive domains as well as additional subdomains. So communication, including expressive, receptive, and written, daily living skills, including personal, domestic, numeric, community, and school community, socialization, including interpersonal relationships, play and leisure, and coping skills, and motor skills, and both fine and gross, and finally, maladaptive behavior, including internalizing, externalizing, and critical. And so you might be wondering, how does the Vineland-3 support ASD assessment? Well, combined with other diagnostic measures, a distinct pattern of results in the following areas makes the Vineland-3 a valuable component of an ASD evaluation. So looking at basic communication, verbal and nonverbal, and the expressive and receptive subdomains of the communication domain, social communication and interaction are explored in the interpersonal relationships and play and leisure subdomains of the socialization domain. For example, conversational skills, play and interaction skills, friendships, social awareness, etc. The critical items category of the maladaptive behaviors captures behaviors such as repetitive movements and speech, fixated interests, unusual sensory experiences, and a lack of response to pain. Updated item content reflects changes in conceptualization of autism spectrum disorder, including perspective taking, pragmatic skills, and social awareness. So, for example, sarcasm, figures of speech, awareness of malintent from others. There's a 24-point V scale, which provides more discrete data points for greater identification of need and progress, and it focuses on a does-do approach versus a can-do approach to assess an individual's functional and independent application of skills to daily contexts and routines. Next, we'll look at the SSIS SEL, or the SSIS Social Emotional Learning Edition. Social emotional learning has been defined as the process of acquiring knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs to identify and manage emotions, to care about others, to make good decisions, to behave ethically and responsibly, and to develop positive relationships and to avoid negative behaviors. SEL skills are typically conceptualized as a specific set of behaviors that individuals use to successfully complete a social task, such as entering a peer group, asking for assistance from a teacher, making friends, or playing a game with another person. As some of you may have noticed, deficits in some of these areas correspond to required deficits in Section A of the DSM-5 text revision and Section 1 of the IDEA criteria for diagnosing ASD. The SSIS SEL is quick and easy to administer with parent, teacher, and student rating forms, as well as a screening progress monitoring scale. The scales can be completed paper pencil or through an on-screen administration or remote administration through Q Global. So we can take a look at what areas it specifically measures, which includes self-awareness, defined as the ability to accurately recognize one's emotions and thoughts and their behavior and their influence on behavior. Self-management, which is defined as the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations. Social awareness, defined as the ability to take the perspective of and emphasize with others from diverse backgrounds and cultures, to understand social and ethical norms or behavior, and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. It also looks at relationship skills, which is the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. And then finally, responsible decision-making skills, which is the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on consideration of ethical standards, safety concerns, social norms, the realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions, and the well-being of self and others. Finally, we'll look at the Brown EFA scales, or Brown Executive Function and Attention Scales. Difficulties with executive function are often found in children with autism spectrum disorders, and the Brown EFA scales is an excellent way to measure this. It addresses situational variability with scales that analyze an individual's behavior using multiple perspectives, for example, the examinee's self-perspective, teacher's perspective, and parents'. The items are more specific and contextual, so it has scales that include items that are more specific and ask about difficulties in a specific context, such as difficulty remembering what's being read. It directly and more accurately reports symptoms, so items focus on severity of specific behaviors as opposed to frequency. Cluster scores in the reports, developed around the 6 executive functions from Dr. Brown's model, provides a starting place for the development or selection of interventions to support treatment and/or instructions. You can also use it for progress monitoring. It's developed to be able to differentiate between administrations for the purpose of determining the effectiveness of treatments, including medication. It's available on Q Interactive with flexible administration, scoring, and reporting options to accommodate your assessment workflow. So you can use our digital platform, paper pencil, or a combination of both. Let's now talk about the cognitive assessments commonly used by school psychologists and educational diagnosticians as part of autism evaluations. So evaluating cognitive abilities offers insight into individuals with this diagnosis across all ages, and school-based evaluation teams can glean useful data for understanding a student's strengths and needs. This can assist the evaluation multidisciplinary team in developing interventions, goals, and instructional programs. Today, we will take a quick look at the WIPC-4, the WISC-5, the DOS-2 normative update in early years, as well as the NEPC-2 and the RAVENS-2. So the WIPC-4, or the Wechsler Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence, 4th edition, is an individually administered intelligence test designed for children ages 2 years and 6 months through 7 years, 7 months. So this can definitely be a useful tool for your early childhood team. It's used to assess cognitive abilities and intellectual functioning in young children using game-like tasks to promote engagement. The WIPC-4 provides scores in various domains such as verbal comprehension, visual spatial, fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speed, and these scores can be used to understand a child's strengths and weaknesses, inform educational planning, and identify potential learning disabilities or developmental delays. Next, we'll look at the WISC-5, or the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, 5th edition, which is also an individually administered intelligence test that's designed for children a little bit older from ages 6 through 16, 11 months. It's used to assess cognitive abilities and intellectual functioning in children as well, and provides scores in various domains such as verbal comprehension, visual spatial, fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speeds. These scores can be used to understand similar things such as strengths and weaknesses and potential learning disabilities or developmental delays. And then next we have the DOS-2, which is also an individually administered clinical assessment for assessing the cognitive abilities that are important to learning. You can use the DOS-2 to identify learning disabilities and intellectual disabilities, as well as properly evaluate English learners, deaf or hard of hearing children, as well as assess giftedness. With out-of-level testing and child-appropriate start points, this time-tested assessment gives you the speed and flexibility you need for children who may struggle with longer tests. In addition to an overall composite, the General Conceptual Ability GCA score, this instrument also yields a special nonverbal composite, or SNC, score for children who may have difficulty with oral language. Next, we'll look at the NEPC-2, which is a comprehensive tool often utilized in evaluations for ASD diagnosis due to its ability to assess various cognitive domains essential for understanding the complexities of ASD. Through its subtest, NEPC-2 evaluates key areas such as attention and executive functioning, language, memory and learning, sensoromotor and social perception, as well as visual spatial processing, all of which can offer valuable insights into the cognitive profile of individuals on the autism spectrum. By examining these cognitive functions alongside behavioral observations and clinical interviews, clinicians can better discern the presence and severity of ASD symptoms, aiding in accurate diagnosis and tailored intervention planning for individuals with ASD. The NEPC-2's versatility in assessing multiple cognitive domains makes it a valuable component in the comprehensive evaluation process for autism spectrum disorder. The RAVENS nonverbal assessment serves as a valuable tool in evaluations for ASD diagnosis as well, particularly for individuals who may struggle with verbal communication or have limited language skills. This assessment evaluates abstract reasoning and problem-solving abilities through the completion of visual pattern puzzles, making it ideal for assessing cognitive strengths and weaknesses in individuals with ASD. By focusing on nonverbal cognitive abilities, RAVENS-2 helps clinicians gain insights into the cognitive profile of individuals on the autism spectrum, complementing other assessment measures and providing a comprehensive understanding of their cognitive functioning. Its nonverbal nature reduces reliance on verbal communication skills, offering a more equitable assessment process for individuals with ASD. As I mentioned when we began discussing some of the cognitive assessments found in the dolls, academic achievement and readiness data is not used exclusively to diagnose ASD. However, it is almost always a part of a full and individual evaluation for all students being considered for special education services. Today, I will be talking about the BRACEN-4 and the RAP-4. The RAP-5. I did want to note that the Bracken 4th edition includes both the Bracken School Readiness Assessment and the Bracken Basic Concept Scales. The BBCS-4R, or the Bracken Basic Concept Scales 4th edition receptive, is a comprehensive assessment that examines basic concept development in children ages 3 to 7 years, 11 months. The BSRA-4, or the Bracken School Readiness Assessment 4th edition, is a screening tool used for school readiness. Both the receptive BBCS-4R and the school readiness, the BSRA-4 versions, involve simple individual test administration. The Bracken Basic Concept Scale 4th Edition Receptive is a developmental assessment designed to evaluate children's school readiness in terms of their understanding of basic concepts that are strongly related to early childhood cognitive and language development, as well as early academic achievement. The Basic Concept Scales includes the 6 school readiness subtests and 4 additional subtests: direction, position, texture, material, quantity, and time sequence. It is useful in identifying deficits in concept development and planning interventions, and it's also useful in facilitating the developmental assessment of children with limited verbal expression that is sometimes seen in children with autism by using a pointing response mode. Administration can be completed on iPads with our Q Interactive platform or entered digitally on Q Global while administering digitally scored, or it can also be digitally scored after paper pencil administration, or finally, you also have hand scoring as an option. The BSRA-4, or the Bracken School Readiness Assessment 4th Edition, is a briefer version of the BBCS-4R. The 6 subtests on the BSRA-4 are designed to evaluate children's school readiness in terms of their understanding of basic concepts that are strongly related to early childhood cognitive and language development, as well as early academic achievement. It provides highly accurate and reliable information about children's comprehension of concepts related to academic success and classroom communication. As with the BBCS-4R, the BSRA-4 only requires a pointing response, making it ideal for children who are shy or who have a receptive or expressive language impairment. A practitioner might choose this over the lengthier version due to its brevity if they suspect that the student would have difficulty with a longer assessment. Next, we'll look at the Wide Range Achievement Test, 5th edition, or the RAP-5. The RAP-5 provides derived scores and interpretive information for 4 subtests: word reading, which measures untimed letter identification and word recognition. In this case, the examinee reads aloud a list of letters and words. Sentence comprehension, which measures the ability to identify the meaning of words and to comprehend the ideas and information in a sentence using an untimed modified close procedure. Each item requires the examinee to read aloud or silently a sentence with the word missing, and then they say the word that best completes the sentence. Next, we have spelling, which measures an individual's ability to write letters and words from dictation without a time limit. And then finally, math computation, which measures an individual's ability to count, identify numbers, solve simple oral math problems, and calculate written math problems with a time limit. Problems are presented in a range of domains, including arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and advanced operations. And then finally, you will also receive a reading composite score, which is created by combining the word reading and sentence comprehension standard scores. You can administer this assessment through Q Global or Q Interactive or paper pencil with the same scoring options mentioned previously. Now, as I mentioned, we'll begin discussing again some of those cognitive assessments. We want to also look at speech and language assessments. So we're going to dive into the CEL-5, the PLS-5, and the CEL-5 metalinguistics. The Clinical Evaluation of Language Fundamentals, 5th edition, also known as the CEL-5, is a flexible system of individually administered tests used to assist a clinician to accurately diagnose a language disorder in children and adolescents ages 5 through 21 years. Using the CEL-5's battery of structured tasks that test the limits of a student's language abilities, as well as observation and interaction-based tasks, clinicians can effectively pinpoint the student's strengths and weaknesses to make appropriate placement and intervention recommendations. The pragmatics profile from this assessment may be of particular interest to our group here today when considering which assessments to give as part of an autism evaluation. The pragmatics profile is used to identify verbal and nonverbal pragmatic deficits that may negatively influence social and academic communication. It's composed of 3 sections: rituals and conversational skills, asking for, giving, and responding to information, and nonverbal communication skills. Students who score below average on the pragmatics profile may have difficulties in establishing relationships with peers and adults in a variety of social contexts. Item response analysis can identify the pragmatic skills categories that are inadequate, and the pragmatic skills ratings are categorized as involving primarily verbal rituals, expressions of intentions, or nonverbal communication skills. Identification of the student's relative strengths and weaknesses can provide a baseline for pragmatics intervention and can be used to evaluate progress. The CEL-5 also has a pragmatics activities checklist. Its purpose is to provide the examiner an opportunity to observe the student's functional communication skills during authentic conversational interactions in order to identify verbal and nonverbal behaviors that may negatively influence social and academic communication. The checklist enables you to identify challenges the student is facing in the following social communication areas: which are nonverbal communications such as gaze, gesture, expression, and body language, as well as verbal communication, so manner of communication and relevance of communication, the quantity of the communication, the quality of the communication, as well as turn-taking rules. And this assessment can be administered through Q Global, Q Interactive, and paper pencil as well. Next, we'll take a look at the Preschool Language Scale 5th edition, or the PLS-5, which is an individually administered play-based instrument that assesses developmental language skills in children from birth to 7 years, 11 months. The areas assessed are attention, play, gesture, vocal development, social communication, semantics, language structure, integrative language skills, and emergent literacy skills. This does require paper and pencil administration, and as you can see there by that golden yellow color, it's something that's included with our DALS Plus. Finally, the CEL5 Metalinguistics is a clinical tool that can be used to assess a student's ability to make inferences, construct conversationally appropriate sentences, understand multiple meaning words and ambiguous sentences, and understand figurative language. The test may be used for initial diagnosis of a language disorder, to evaluate metalinguistic aspects of a social or pragmatic communication disorder, or as a complement to an extension of the social pragmatic communications skills assessed by the CEL5. It's used to identify students excuse me, I lost my place here. It does include 5 standalone tests: Metalinguistics Profile, a rating scale examining higher level language skills used in the classroom and home settings. It has 2 tests of metapragmatic skills examining the student's ability to respond appropriately to the communicative demands of the situation, as well as making inferences, so assessing the ability to make logical inferences based on everyday conversations and situations, as well as conversational skills. So it can assess the ability to initiate a conversation and respond in a way that is both relevant and pragmatically appropriate to the content and audience, and grammatically accurate. There are also 2 tests of metasemantic skills, examining the student's ability to understand language content as it relates to the larger communication context. We also have multiple meanings, which assesses the ability to recognize multiple meaning words and match the correct meaning for the situation or context, as well as figurative language, which assesses the ability to interpret common figurative expressions such as idioms needed to understand spoken and written communication. It's widely used in social situations and in academic curriculum. Idioms are often misinterpreted by students who fail to understand that a literal interpretation of an idiom does not make sense contextually. And for administration options for this, we do have the Q Global Scoring and Reporting, as well as a paper pencil administration. And then finally, we will be taking a look at a few motor and sensory assessments that are included in the DALS. While unusual reactions to sensory input and/or unusual sensory interest is part of the autism diagnostic criteria, motor impairment is not. Motor impairment is, however, common among individuals with autism spectrum disorder. Determining fine and gross motor skills can play a big role in early detection and subsequent intervention. Today, we will touch on the upcoming BOT3, newly released MABC3, the PDCAT, and the Sensory Profile 2. The BOT3 measures a broad array of fine and gross motor skills. There are 8 core subtests and 1 supplementary subtest that allow for in-depth assessment of motor abilities and identification of areas of relative strength. Its age range is 4 years to 25 years, 11 months. The fine motor measures include fine motor precision, fine motor integration, manual dexterity, and upper limb coordination. And the gross motor measures include bilateral coordination, balance, strength, dynamic movement, and an optional extended balance subtest. The administration time is approximately 50 to 90 minutes. There are print and digital options, as well as the Q Global on-screen administration, and it's often used jointly between occupational therapists and physical therapists, and it's very useful for goal setting and monitoring progress. The MABC3 provides a measure of gross and fine motor coordination difficulties as well in children and young adults. Its age range does go down a little bit more than the BOT3 to 3 years, and it also has a relatively short administration time, making it a great option when you suspect that a student might have difficulty with a lengthy evaluation. You'll look at manual dexterity, aiming and catching, as well as balance and locomotion. It includes tests as well as a checklist, which can be available as a standalone product, and its administration time is approximately 30 to 45 minutes with print and digital options. It also includes a non-motor factor score, and as I mentioned, is very useful for identifying motor impairment. Now, I did want to take a look here at some differences between the MABC3 and the BOT3 and when you might use one over the other. So presently, the Bot 2 which is the previous edition, which is about to be updated in June, is the go-to motor assessment for many OTs and PTs in the US for good reason. It's comprehensive, reliable, and we've all known and loved it for years. But in some situations, the MABC3 may be a better fit. For example, the age range of the Bot 2 is 4 to 21 years, and the same tasks are used throughout the test. So a lot of times the kiddos at the younger end of that age range can struggle with the test items, which can make it hard to get a sense of what they are able to do. The MABC3 has 3 age bands with tasks for each band designed to be developmentally appropriate, which can make it a better choice for younger children who are maybe more difficult to assess with the bot. Similarly, if you have individuals who have cognitive or language difficulties or have difficulty paying attention, the shorter administration time and flexibility allowed in delivering task instructions can make the MABC3 worth considering over the bot. The MABC3 offers the checklist while the bot does not. And this checklist is an excellent way to find out about an individual's motor skills in everyday situations, which is important to gain a complete picture of motor performance in order to set meaningful and client-centered goals. So even if you use the bot, you can still use that MABC3 checklist alongside to supplement your findings. The checklist also offers an alternative if it's not possible to administer the test because of perhaps time constraints or perhaps the individual is simply not able to cope with a formal testing situation. And in an ideal world, you would have both the Movement ABC3 and the Bot 3 as part of your toolkit, and you do and will with the dolls. Next, we'll take a look at the PDCAT, which measures capabilities in 4 primary domains. Daily activities, which assesses the individual's ability to perform everyday tasks such as eating, dressing, grooming, and using the bathroom. Mobility, which evaluates the child's skills in moving around, including walking, running, navigating stairs, and using mobility devices if applicable. The social and cognitive, which looks at a child's social interaction skills, communication abilities, and cognitive skills related to daily activities and social participation. And then finally, responsibility. So this domain assesses the extent to which the individual takes responsibility for managing their health, safety, and personal care. And one special thing I want to note about the PDCAT is that it has an autism spectrum module. So this module, the PDCAT, has been validated for the population of children and adolescents with autism spectrum disorder. This module includes additional directions to help respondents select an appropriate rating given the unique characteristics of children with autism. This module also includes newer revised items in the daily activities, social cognitive, and responsibility domains. In addition, scaling of the items on the social cognitive domain has been adjusted according to the unique patterns of children and youth with autism, making this an excellent item to keep in your toolkit. And then finally, we're going to look at the Sensory Profile 2, which allows you to make theory-based decisions leveraging principles of neuroscience, sensory processing, strength-based approaches, and ecological models embedded in the items and scoring structure. You'll be able to identify and document how sensory processing may be contributing to or interfering with a child's participation at home, school, and the community. And it also contributes valuable information to a comprehensive assessment of the child's sensory strengths and challenges and context. You'll be able to develop effective treatment plans, interventions, and everyday remediation strategies. And as I mentioned before, unusual reactions to sensory input and/or unusual sensory interest is part of the autism diagnostic criteria for both the DSM-5 TR and IDEA. The Sensory Profile 2 provides a data-based way to document this criteria because research shows that as high as 80 to 90% of individuals with autism experience differences with sensory processing to their typically developing peers. Additionally, during the development of the Sensory Profile 2, children with autism spectrum disorders engaged in behaviors depicted on the child's Sensory Profile 2 more often than their peers, with the exception of visual sensory processing items, which isn't necessarily surprising since visual processing has been reported as a relative strength for children with autism spectrum disorder. And so you have the ability to send out a usage through Q Global for this assessment, or if you prefer the paper pencil method, you can print off protocols for that and have them scored through the system as well. And so with that being said, we are now at the end of the presentation, and so we have the opportunity to look at any questions. So please add any of those remaining to the follow-up form if we're not going to have time to finish that. And someone from our team will reach back out via email with an answer. And I wanted to share our final page here where for more information on any of these assessments, you can reach out to your state's assessment consultant by scanning the QR code, or if you go to just search pearsonassessments.com and assessment representatives, you can see here on the screen a list of my wonderful teammates here I am the assessment consultant for Arkansas, Arizona, Guam, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Utah. So if any of you here are from those states, I'm your assessment consultant. But for any other ones, please reach out to those shown on the screen here. And with that being said, Kim and Chuck, if we want to look at any other questions maybe that we haven't answered, I invite you guys to come off mute and help me out here if we have any.
No, we're doing pretty good with responding. The last one posted was
Awesome.
about the administration of WIPC via Q Global. That can be administered by Q Interactive and to some extent with Q Global using the digital STEM books and a paper record form. But I think Kim's answering that one right now in the chat. So
Yeah.
outside of that, it looks like we've answered just about everything. Um, April or Andrea, if you guys are on, there's a question about whether this video will be available and accessible later. If you guys can answer that. Um, Again, a question about this video being accessible.
So there's a question about the BSRA Spanish forms. Those are included at no additional charge for Dolls Plus customers. So to obtain the BSRA Spanish forms, you would want to submit a forms order via the Dolls website or through your assessment consultant to request those forms to be shipped to you. Natalie, it looks like I see a question about needing a printed version of the Vineland. You actually do have access to be able to print the forms within your Dolls Q Global account. So as long as you are a digital assessment library district, you can go into your Dolls resource library and go to your printable forms. And there are Vineland forms there that are available to be printed. And then you can obviously go back into the platform to have that scored.
So Tyler, one of the questions for you is, what are your suggestions when the student may be high functioning autism, but is also coming out high on many other scales, ADHD, anxiety? I receive a lot of these referrals, and teasing out autism from the other areas is difficult.
So with that question, you're right, Allison. That is something that's extremely tricky to do. Um, what I would recommend in that case is to do your best to use your professional judgment based on what you know about the student and what the members of your multidisciplinary team do to work to determine whether or not the behaviors that are exhibiting are primarily due to those other areas on that scale versus strictly due to them having autism, if that makes sense. Again, that's a very, very difficult and tricky question to answer. I understand how hard that can be.
Tyler, can the BSRA Spanish translation form be used simply for the translation while still administering via the iPad?
Yes, I believe so. Kim, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe you can.
I believe so as well, but we will double check on that and circle back with you.
Another question about the new Wechsler nonverbal. It is just beginning in the works. So I've had pinged a couple of other people and I haven't heard back from them. I'm guessing it will be 2026 when that publishes, but I'm not positive about that. Okay, and in case anybody missed the response in the Q&A, this webinar will be posted on our YouTube page, so you'll have access to this as well. So Allison has a question. Is there a handout or graphic that might show what areas would be elevated across test batteries that would support eligibility of autism? Kim, Tyler, do you guys know if we have any? I don't know of anything like that that goes down to that level of test scores across batteries.
I'm not aware of anything either like that.
Yeah, I'm not either, but that's a great point and perhaps something that we can look into. But yeah, we'll take that one back as well.
Okay. I don't see any other questions at this point, Tyler, that we haven't responded to.
Awesome. And yep, that sounds good. Then we can recircle on those few that we weren't able to answer. But I think if no one else has any further questions at this time here, we can let everyone go.
Perfect. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.